Tonight, we check in with the poor man's Greg Gutfeld, George Clooney. Remember, he wrote a scathing op-ed prior to the election calling on Joe Biden to drop out? And this week, he took to CNN, the only place he's seen less than in his own movies, to gloat. God, I hope Jake Tapper doesn't plant his lips firmly on George's puckered ass.
George Clooney thought he could moonwalk into politics, espresso in hand, smug grin in place, until Greg Gutfeld and Megyn Kelly tag-teamed him like it was WrestleMania for Hollywood has-beens. One minute he's preaching from his multi-million-dollar mansion. The next he's getting verbally suplexed straight back to Lake Como. So, what did Clooney say that sparked the brutal takedown? Stick around, because this wasn't just a clash of opinions. This was Hollywood arrogance meeting a brick wall, and Clooney never saw it coming.
What's the matter, George? Are the Hollywood roles getting a little hard to come by as you age and get decidedly more smug and self-congratulatory? I'm just asking. And chooses to finish this show by lecturing the audience on how journalism ought to be done. Speaking as Edward R. Murrow, he warns about the ongoing struggle for truth and integrity in the media. Truth and integrity. About the potential for the media to be manipulated and used for propaganda.
George Clooney must have glanced at the chaos, soaring inflation, gas station arguments like it's the Great Depression, and thought, you know what America needs? Another millionaire lecture. Because nothing screams unity like a guy in a $20,000 tux sipping espresso in Lake Como, telling working-class Americans how to vote, all while his gardener quietly manicures the estate in the background. Thanks, George. Real relatable.
It was a civic duty. When I saw people on my side of the street not telling the truth, I thought that was time to...
Are people still mad at you for that?
Some people, sure.
Wow, if that's Clooney with makeup. Imagine what he looks like without it, huh?
Yes, George Clooney has officially tried to level up from Hollywood heartthrob to America's political savior, because when the guy who nearly tanked the Batman franchise says it's time for national reflection, you're supposed to listen, or so his PR team hoped. Instead, what followed was a glorious slow-motion wreck of elite self-importance, getting body-slammed by Greg Gutfeld's sledgehammer sarcasm and obliterated by a laser-guided intellectual torpedo courtesy of Megyn Kelly. Spoiler alert, Clooney didn't stand a chance.
So she and George get together and they start navel-gazing on stage about themselves, of course, and their vaunted profession and how bad, how just terrible the media is, and had the following exchange.
What we do in this is we talk about the responsibility of journalists to hold truth to power, right? That's our goal. And so if you're doing that, and we don't tell people what to think when we show that montage at the end.
Clooney imagined a Hollywood script. Him, the modern-day philosopher, voice soaring over patriotic music, inspiring a nation. The reality? Greg Gutfeld laughed so hard he nearly got an ab workout. And Megyn Kelly dismantled his moral compass with the precision of a surgeon. If that surgeon used a jackhammer...
Remember, Clooney's the same guy who held a star-studded fundraiser for Joe weeks before he dropped out and only called for him to quit after his disastrous debate. Clooney ignored concerns over Biden's age for years, only to magically come to the conclusion that he was demented when America finally saw what Clooney had been hiding. That's the problem with Dems. They're obedient shills for awful people, then pretend otherwise once voters see that they're full. But remember, we were pointing out Joe's dementia before it was cool. We knew Biden was the worst president ever, which probably means Jimmy Carter died a happy man.
Greg Gutfeld watched Clooney's grandstanding with all the respect of a cat being lectured by a goldfish about the water cycle. To him, Clooney's statements were the political equivalent of junk food, overstuffed with expensive vocabulary but completely void of substance. Gutfeld tore into the speech like it was a bloated Oscars monologue running 30 minutes too long. Clooney's hypocrisy wasn't just visible, it was practically performance art. Picture this. Flying halfway around the world in a carbon-spewing private jet to talk about climate change, all while believing that owning a vineyard somehow qualifies you to speak on global policy. According to Gutfeld, Clooney is the poster child for the Malibu Messiah complex, that uniquely Hollywood delusion where celebrities mistake standing ovations for academic credentials. Gutfeld didn't need to dive into policy wonkery. Tio. He had to do was sketch a vivid image, a pampered actor who probably spends more time on skincare than most lawmakers spend reading legislation, suddenly deciding he's the oracle of democracy. And just like that, the illusion shattered.
Two nuggets are breaking. Tara Palmieri, who's got her own Substack and podcast now, she's been on the show, she got a copy and released a couple of the nuggets, and so did The Guardian. But hers was a really interesting nugget. And she's apparently in this book, they reveal that George Clooney saw Morning Joe one day, right after his op-ed, and Mika Brzezinski was suggesting that Barack Obama was behind the George Clooney op-ed. That was basically making Clooney seem like Obama's puppet.
Yeah.
Here's
In Greg Gutfeld's eyes, though not in so many words, George Clooney was that guy at a dinner party who hasn't read a book since 1998, but still insists on lecturing everyone about how the government should run. The takedown was both savage and hilarious. Gutfeld likened Clooney's political commentary to trying to fix a leaky pipe with a bottle of cologne. Sure, it smells nice, but it solves absolutely nothing. According to him, Clooney's grasp on Middle America was about as accurate as a Yelp review written by someone who's never left Beverly Hills. And in true roastmaster fashion, Gutfeld reminded everyone that Clooney once co-starred in a film where he shared the screen with a talking goat. If that's not foreign policy experience, what is? While Gutfeld flamethrowed his way through Clooney's ego with biting sarcasm, Megyn Kelly set up a surgical theater of logic and calm precision. Where Greg brought the laughs, Megyn brought the cross-examination. She didn't just clap back, she delivered a full-blown closing argument, the kind you'd expect in a high-stakes courtroom drama. She laid out Clooney's behavior as a textbook, case of elite virtue signaling, coming from a man whose top talents are memorizing scripts and crying on cue.
I bet there's one person in particular he thinks is spectacular.
There's one person in particular I think is spectacular. There are a few who I think is levitating above that is Wes Moore. I like him a lot. I think he could be someone we could all join in behind. We have to find somebody rather soon. It's our job now to put together a proper team to stand up because we're right now polling very poorly.
I love that. Levitating above, as opposed to sinking to the bottom, like his last movie.
Megyn Kelly dissected George Clooney's contradictions like a scientist studying a bizarre new species. Here was a man delivering climate change sermons while zipping around in gas-guzzling luxury vehicles that cost more than the average home. A self-proclaimed crusader for equality, living in a palatial estate with security tighter than Buckingham Palace? Check and check. But Kelly didn't just point out the hypocrisy, she spotlighted it like a Broadway production. To her, Clooney didn't merely miss the point, he was the point. A walking, talking billboard for just how out of touch Hollywood elites have become. It wasn't that his opinions were particularly groundbreaking. They were recycled talking points, wrapped in moral smugness and served with a garnish of caviar. Kelly went deeper, targeting the illusion that celebrity equals credibility. Just because someone's face is recognizable doesn't mean their opinions should carry more weight than a raccoon's viral Twitter thread. She questioned why networks treat Clooney like a Democratic oracle, as if he drafted the Constitution between espresso shots. But the sharpest part of her takedown, her complete refusal to be dazzled. Where others see Clooney and hear violins, Kelly saw a polished PR performance, and she wasn't buying the costume, the script, or the applause.
Is going on, this is to 60 last night, about, you mentioned his op-ed in the New York Times on Joe Biden and why he did it. Such a selfless, brave act, Ben. Here he was.
I was raised to tell the truth. I had seen the president up close for this fundraiser, and I was surprised. And so I feel as if there was a lot of profiles in cowardice in my party through all of that.
Oh, wow.
And I was not proud of that. And I also believed I had to tell the truth.
That fundraiser where he saw Biden almost falling off the stage, where Obama came out to grab him, was June 15th. The debate was June 27th. It wasn't until July 10th, almost a month after he attended the fundraiser with him, that George Clooney finally wrote that op-ed after it became clear that Joe Biden wasn't stepping down. He's such a lie.
While Clooney floated on his self-made cloud of sophistication, Megyn Kelly stayed firmly grounded, scalpel of truth in hand. She didn't go after the man himself, she went after the myth. The bizarre notion that charisma and a symmetrical jawline qualify someone to solve global crises. And the best part? The public devoured it like popcorn at a summer blockbuster. Gutfeld's zingers went viral. Memes of Clooney photoshopped onto cheesy motivational posters with captions like, "Speak less, flex less, flooded timelines." Twitter turned into a digital battlefield, Clooney defenders armed with cappuccinos on one side, and critics swinging sledgehammers of common sense on the other. Kelly's Takedown, meanwhile, became the clip of the week, quoted, clipped, and played across every show that dares to challenge celebrity authority. Her commentary wasn't just analysis, it was a moment of clarity. The kind that makes people pause mid-scroll and say, "Finally, someone said it." She didn't storm in swinging. She strolled in like a surgeon, calm, clinical, rolling, up her sleeves with the energy of, "Oh, George, you really want to go there?" While Gutfeld had already body-slammed Clooney into the punchline graveyard, Kelly methodically carved up his argument into clean, surgical slices of secondhand embarrassment.
But in this new world of common sense, what does he align with? He might have way more in common with Trump than he is with the progressives. The question is, does he have the bravery to say that? I have no idea where he stands on the border, sanctuary cities, or trans extremism. How does he feel about the fires in LA? Is he happy with how it was handled by Mayor What's-Her-Face and Governor who's his name?
On her podcast, where smirks come gift-wrapped in citations, Megyn Kelly took George Clooney's political musings, held them up to the light like a piece of suspicious meat, and proceeded to fact-check the ever-loving espresso out of him. "Let me get this straight," she began in that signature tone, half litigator, half glacier. "You think you're defending democracy from Lake Como, feet in a heated infinity pool with your Wi-Fi router set to superiority complex?" Then she dove in headfirst. Clooney's remarks about media disinformation, threats to democracy, and his brave new take that conservative voices are the problem? Yeah, Megyn brought receipts. She cited stats showing trust in mainstream media is in free fall, plummeting, faster than Clooney's last box office flop, and reminded listeners that silencing dissent isn't democracy, it's just an echo chamber with fancier lighting. And then came the look, that signature Megyn Kelly expression that says, "Are you actually serious?" The one she wears when someone lumbers into a debate armed with vibes and zero logic. If you've ever seen someone try to explain cryptocurrency to their dog, that was the energy. Except this time, the confused pup was George Clooney, wagging his tail while pontificating on global affairs with the authority of a man who once voiced a talking fox.
Roberts, who outed herself not only as a leftist, which we knew, but as somebody who, and by the way, she's also a husband stealer. She stole the husband that she has right now in a reported affair. So, okay, maybe don't be the voice of the ad in which we talk about women betraying their husbands, because in the leftist view, marriages are not about honesty and talking about one's differences and agreeing to disagree on certain dicey issues, but they're about lying. And they believe this so strongly, we put it in an ad. And her pal, George Clooney, who did something similar for another ad, same. You got Joe Biden out. How'd it work out for you? How'd that go? Maybe you should have said something a little
But wait, it got better. Cue the hypocrisy highlight reel. With surgical precision, Megyn Kelly pointed out that George Clooney loves to lecture the world on climate change, while racking up enough private jet miles to qualify for frequent flyer therapy. And she didn't stop there. She exposed how Clooney preaches unity, but only the kind that excludes conservatives, libertarians, truckers, or anyone without a SAG card and a subscription to The Atlantic. Then came the pièce de résistance, his dramatic monologues about the sanctity of democracy, which, oddly enough, only seemed to surface when his political team isn't in power. As Kelly dryly put it, it's democracy when they win, it's fascism when they don't. Apparently, ballots only matter when George Clooney likes the results. Somewhere in Italy, a cappuccino probably curdled itself in shame, but Megyn wasn't there just to roast. She came to dismantle. The deeper she went, the more brutal the reality became for anyone still clinging to the idea of Clooney as some kind of political sage. She dropped the hammer on the bigger question. Why does Hollywood keep auditioning for the role of America's conscience? And why are news networks treating actors like foreign policy experts, as if starring in Syriana is the same thing as shaping real-world diplomacy?
It's about cowardice. He waited a long time, but he should have the guts to maybe say that his friends in Hollywood, like John Voight or Mel Gibson or Sylvester Stallone, who shared a risk, might have been right on a few things. He's starring in Glengarry Glen Ross. Am I right?
No, it's Good Night and Good Luck.
Oh,
sorry,
never mind.
my fault.
I was going to say, I mean, they have tremendous respect for David Mamet. David Mamet is one of the most conservative people. So maybe instead of just sitting in silence, you should actually speak up for some of the people who shared the risk in Hollywood.
And there it was, the final fatal blow to Clooney's image as a political guru. Megyn Kelly laid it bare. This wasn't leadership. It was theater, grandstanding in Armani. It wasn't civic duty. It was narcissism masquerading as activism. Carefully choreographed for cocktail parties where everyone nods in agreement and nobody stepped inside a Walmart. She likened Clooney's posturing to Hollywood's latest fad, celebrities cosplaying as revolutionaries. They're not risking a thing, she said. They're not on front lines. They're tweeting from yachts and delivering speeches at award shows, only to be played off by the orchestra for being too self-righteous. By the end, you almost felt sorry for Clooney. Almost. Megyn didn't yell. She didn't rant. She simply opened the door to reality and watched him stumble over his own tangled logic. It was a quiet execution. Surgical, devastating, and oddly beautiful if you enjoy watching intellectual arrogance get vaporized by icy facts delivered in a tone cold enough to refrigerate groceries. And somewhere, probably behind $1 million espresso machine, George Clooney blinked in disbelief at the backlash, clueless that Megyn Kelly had just turned his political dreams into a cautionary tale for every actor who mistakes applause for wisdom.
I think, there's Johnny come lately, I was raised to be honest is a bunch of BS. All right. Obama told him to do it. He sees himself as this extremely important person. I think he's an arrogant, condescending, smug individual who thinks that, he should be able to tell people in America and the Democrat Party, certainly, what they should and shouldn't do. This president, Joe Biden, is one of the most disastrous presidents that we've had in America.
So now we've got Clooney, the would-be philosopher king, adrift in a sea of self-importance, paddling with a golden oar, wondering how his carefully curated image got flipped into a punchline by two people who never once stepped foot on a red carpet. It's like he tried to play chess against a guy wielding a sledgehammer and a woman armed with a legal brief, and still thought he had a chance. But this isn't just about Clooney. No, this is about a deeper sickness in Hollywood. The belief that fame is a shortcut to credibility. Celebrities assume that because they're adored on screen, they must be enlightened off it. That applause for acting automatically means agreement with their ideas. Gutfeld and Kelly didn't just roast Clooney, they took aim at the endless cycle of award shows where millionaires pat themselves on the back for pretending to understand real people. What Clooney walked into was a trap of his own making. He expected deference. Instead, he got demolished. Gutfeld saw through the glam and set it on fire. Kelly peeled back the curtain and found, surprise, a regular guy with opinions no more, refined than your local Uber drivers. The only difference? The Uber driver probably has more real-world experience. And in the aftermath, the message was clear. America is exhausted, not just by celebrity sermons, but by the assumption that elites know better. Clooney became the poster child for everything people roll their eyes at: luxury, lectures, limousine liberalism. Gutfeld and Kelly didn't need to shout or organize boycotts. They brought something far more effective: wit, logic, and a keen sense for when someone's full of it. Clooney offered a spotlight. They held up a mirror. So next time a celebrity steps up to the podium to tell America how to think, they better look both ways, because Greg Gutfeld might be waiting with a punchline, and Megyn Kelly could be lurking, with a closing argument ending in, "And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we don't take policy advice from a man who once wrestled a CGI goat." Roll credits. Not the Hollywood kind, but the real ones, where regular people finally get the last word.